At Avocado, we know that not all mattresses are created equal. While other beds trap heat, ours sets it free. Made without polyurethane foams and crafted with natural latex, cotton, and wool. Breathable, comfortable, and supportive. No overheating, just clean, organic sleep that performs. Save 15% on our award-winning mattresses this July 4th sale. Avocado, celebrate organic. Shop at avocadomattress.com or leading retailers nationwide.
I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. When it comes to nutrition and how we fuel our bodies, so much of what we do has very little to do with what we know about carbs, sugars, and protein, and what we, quote, should put into our bodies, and really everything to do with how we're responding to our emotions and our surroundings. And whether we're calling it stress eating or emotional eating, to truly resolve it, it's essential to first understand why we do it and what we can do to help change these patterns. And there's a lot of really simple, seamless steps that don't have to overhaul our life, but can just make us a lot more at peace with this. So joining me today to help share some insight is Bryan Batt. You know him from Mad Men. He's starred in countless roles in film and theater. He's an author, a philanthropist, and owns a home decor store called Hazelnut on Magazine Street here in New Orleans. Bryan's no stranger to stress and the challenges of high demands on his very limited time, but he's always open, warm, welcoming, engaging to everyone he comes in contact with. But he's also worked very specifically and I'll say very successfully at maintaining this positive energy. He's found these outlets and strategies so that those inevitable stressors and anxieties don't sideline his wellness and balance. So welcome, Bryan.
Well, thank you. You put that quite well. I'm impressed with myself.
Well, when I thought, who's going to join me to talk about stress? And I've heard you just over the years talk about, we all experience it.
Oh, yes. It comes with the territory. You know, you're born and then you have stress. But it's how we deal with it. And I come from a long line of emotional eaters, stress eaters. We like to eat when we're happy. We eat when we're sad. We eat when we're busy. We eat when we're lazy. It's, you know, and I think might be a little New Orleans thing or a Southern thing. But when you identify it and you realize, oh, this isn't the healthiest way for me to deal with this, you realize that noticing the problem and talking about it and acknowledging it, and what my mom always taught me, make a list of the good things and the bad things. And pretty much every morning I wake up with a list. I wake up and I make a list of the things that I have to do on my calendar. And then sometimes you'll notice some things don't have to be done if there's too many on there or someone else can handle it. But, you know, using food to mask or compensate for problems or stress is really not the healthiest thing to do. Food is basically, as you know, you're a nutritionist, is our fuel. It's you're putting gas in the gas tank. But it sometimes makes us feel better. Maybe it's a memory, a trigger, a memory, how much we loved ice cream as a child, or birthday cake, or French fries. And you know, it triggers those things in the brain too.
There's so many reasons. And what I find with a lot of clients is there's a lot of self-sabotage. And then there's a lot of guilt, and there's a lot of, anger.
Guilt is a useless emotion unless you've intentionally hurt someone. That's it. End of story with guilt.
You heard it here. Wipe that out of your emotion options there. But it's so true. And so I think what I'll find, a lot of people have a plan and they say, okay, I'm going to start eating healthier to whatever the goal is, lose weight, improve my XYZ. I'm going to follow this type of a diet. And, they put their game plan together. And when they wake up, they've got this positive mindset and they feel like they've got willpower of steel. And at nighttime, though, and when they look at, the day retrospectively, they're beating themselves up. Why did I think I could do it this morning? I've got no willpower. I'm so weak. I let all these things slip. And what I'll realize is it's less about knowing how much carbs, protein, sugar we need to eat, but it's more about what are we letting kind of chisel away at that willpower through the day. And when we look at what are all these little stressors that kind of pile on, when we either let them stress us,
That's the key. I think letting things get to you. We allow whatever comes into our life, we allow it to affect us. It's our reaction that is going to trigger how we deal with it.
And I think it's key to realize that we truly do have, science shows us that there's limited stores and reserves of willpower in all of us.
Oh.
And some of us get a lot of it and some of us get a little of it. So if you're one that already has maybe just a little bit of it and you let these other things kind of chisel away at you, it's important to kind of, as your day goes, think of it almost as your reserves, and you've got to protect those reserves.
Right. And you said earlier, like beating yourself up, and I'm a firm believer in don't do that. Life is going to find a way to do it for you. So,
Right.
don't do it to yourself. Some of the things you were saying just triggered a lot of memories and experiences that I had. I find, when I'm trying to lose weight or eat healthy, I kind of have to clear the house, get rid of the temptation in front of you. If it's not there, you're going to have to go out and get it. And you might be able to tuck yourself off the ledge in the interim.
And I think it's funny that you say go out and get it, because people will say I'm a closet eater.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Or I have a lot of people who now refer to themselves as a car eater. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of times happens is when we look at why do we stress eat, and this is something I think understanding it and understanding, like hearing these reasons of what's inside of our head and what's kind of driving these behaviors. When you're foraging next time through the pantry or through the fridge, keeping these things in mind. It's crazy that the things that we reach for when we stress eat, what are your top things that you would reach for?
King cake. I'm crazy about king cake. I just like, and I love, but I really love savory. So if there's, a good steak in the fridge, I will cook it up. I love ground meat. I do love protein. So it's not that bad. I'm not a carby.
That is so unusual too. And
Isn't it?
It is unusual. But you're really fortunate. What's insane about this, and I think this is important for us to understand, and people who are carb cravers, it's so unusual that you're a protein craver. And I'm happy that you are. Because when someone thinks, what do I eat whenever I stress eat? Because when they've planned well, they're reaching for that lean steak. Or they're reaching for something like that.
And that's why I try to keep most things, in the house that I like. Now, my partner, he's a carby. He loves pasta and breads and all that kind of stuff. So, we have to balance it out. But you said something earlier about, when stress comes in and why you eat. It's also identifying why. Why do I feel this way, and why am I turning to food? What is that food going to satiate? What lack, what need do I have, am I not being fulfilled with, that food is going to fix? And it ain't going to do it. Whether it's you're not getting your work done, or you have relationship issues, or, there's a myriad of different human emotions that are not being met, that we turn to external things like food or alcohol or drugs or whatever, that we think that's going to make it better.
I 100% agree. And I think that kind of goes back to having that black and white knowledge that someone may say, here's what my plan is, but then why is it so derailed? And what's interesting about those carb things, that a lot, the pasta, the rice, the potatoes, whatever it is, but also the sweets,
Yes. Well, the sugar, sugar is heroin.
And what's interesting is when you look at the carbs and those combined with the salt and the fat. So if you think French fries, or you think even cookie dough or ice cream still has the salt and the fat with those carbs, that trio of compounds, the carbs, salt, fat, actually light up receptors in our brains like addictive drugs like cocaine and heroin. And so when someone says, I crave carbs, they really do.
Really are.
But once you realize that and you think, why do I feel like I have no control? Because to some degree you don't. And a lot of people, these receptors light up a lot stronger than others. And it'll almost be, it's crazy.
It's chemistry.
It's chemistry.
We are walking chemical experiments.
It's very true.
And everyone's different. I was saying earlier, everyone's different. We're all wired differently. That's why we all have different likes, different dislikes. And I think it's all because we're all different chemicals. We're all different wiring. What stresses you out is not going to stress me out. What you like, your taste of food is not going to necessarily be mine. And
knowing that we all have different varying levels of responses to some of those things. I've had clients who have such an extreme reaction in their brains that those circuits are really highly activated by those, that they could have 2 large pizzas, followed by a gallon of ice cream, followed by the entire bag of Snickers. And we think, gosh, I would feel sick. They feel euphoria. Wow. And as soon as I hear that, I know that there's not any wiggle room for a little bit. Right. The little, fun-sized pack of M&Ms, that's like that little fun-sized dose of crack,
Exactly.
And so I think when we look at the why, and you think, well, why at night when I get in, I'm tired, all this stuff is swirling through my head, I've had stressors from work or home or relationships, or I'm bored, I'm lonely, any of those negative things you were saying earlier, kind of just the stuff that's swirling around us. When we're reaching for those foods, especially those carb foods, whether they're sweet or savory, they're having this reaction of that euphoria, that calming. They're lighting up these very powerful circuits in our brains.
And you don't want that happening at night because you really want to wind down and go to bed. Yes. I found as I get older, I think it's a great thing is not to eat late. I try not to eat past 8 o'clock, max 8:30, 9 o'clock for many reasons. But one thing I'm going to, true confession here. When I came back to New Orleans, now I go back and forth between New York, LA and New Orleans. Mainly did Broadway theater for years. And at 8 o'clock or 7:30, when I got to the theater, something really exciting was going to happen. I was going to be performing on Broadway. And when I got here, I found myself around 7:30, always having a cocktail, and I would start my drinking. And it got into a little habit. And I realized after talking to someone, they said, Bryan, you used to have something really fun and exciting happening at this time. And to realize that it was just this basic sense memory need, or that I was used to something happening. So it could be as simple as that, these triggers with the memory of like what pizza did for you the first time you had it. Or it was an old boyfriend that got away, that you shared pizza with. Why do we want that? I'm a firm believer there's another psychological aspect to this.
I love that example because I have clients that when they leave work, if it's been a stressful day, they will take a different route home that doesn't pass the bakery. Because, so they know that they've conditioned themselves that I'm stressed. I'm going to go through and pick up XYZ from the bakery or go through the drive-through. And so it's these conditioned responses.
But what is it about the bakery that's going to relieve that stress?
It
doesn't.
Carbs, salt, fat, sugar, all lighting up their brains. It makes you happy again. Yes.
But it's not going to change that stress. It's not going to change that day.
And it results in the guilt.
Same with alcohol. It's not going to change what happens. It's only going to make it kind of muddier and crazier, and then you're not going to be able to make a good decision.
And then I think the other thing on all of these is looking at, okay, there's this chemical thing that happens in our brains and lights up all these areas. But the other thing is it simply serves as a distraction. And so food, or like you said, alcohol too, but even just that hand to mouth of the ice cream, the chips or whatever.
Keeping busy.
It is a distraction from the negative stuff that's swirling around in your head. Right. And so a lot of people say it's almost like that noise, and how do I turn down that noise? And so we're eating to numb out. And in a lot of cases, people are drinking to numb out and really turning down that noise. So what can we do separately to dial back that noise besides numbing out with the food and the drink?
Well, there's something positive, like reading or crafts.
I'm laughing because it's like Bryan's like, wait, she's asking me. No, what I do.
I have to get off the computer because I find myself doing that a lot. It also stirs. Sometimes you're looking on Facebook and you get all upset about what's going on. But, I love to paint. I don't get to do it enough, but I love to create. And my friends tease me. They say, okay, you're an actor. You design stuff for the store. You paint, you do this, you sing, you do, and I said, I just don't want to leave any stone unturned. Right. I believe life is an and proposition, not an or proposition. You can do this and that, not this or that. Everybody wants to put you in a box, and I don't want to be put in a box until I'm dead. So it's, so fine, you never know. And you know what? What's the worst that can happen? You're not the best at it, but at least if it brings you enjoyment and if it takes your mind off of the stress of your day, it can be as simple as sitting watching a good movie or taking a good walk in the park or reading a great book or crocheting or knitting or painting or woodwork or whatever it is.
And I think a couple of the things you said, like painting is really cool, or anything that's with your hands like that. I'll have people tell me they do the jumble or the crosswords.
Yes, crosswords or Scrabble, or there's tons of things to keep the brain working and the body.
And it keeps your hands busy, so you can't keep reaching back into that bag.
Or
Yes.
like, and another as cigarettes too.
Yes.
People, I found when I was on Mad Men, we had to smoke on set, but we smoked, herbal, fake cigarettes. But little one by one, we all started smoking real cigarettes off set because we were used to this. Thank God I put them down when I was written off the show.
Right.
But it is
a hard habit to break.
It's a hard habit to break. It wasn't that hard for me, thank heavens.
And you have factored in movement. The park is near you, but you walk
Yes.
daily, or how do you work that in?
I try to do it every day. It depends on the weather. I do some floor stretches and sit-ups and all that stuff every
More
other
in the
day.
Evenings or mornings?
In the morning.
Okay.
It kind of gets me going in the morning, and then I should do twice a week, but I do once a week the heavy resistant weight training, but not a whole lot. I should do more.
But again, kind of like the guilt doesn't belong in our vocabulary. I feel like should is that, there's the
Yes,
should
you're right.
kind of brings on that feeling of guilt because I should.
Yeah.
Well, one of the
if
things
I really wanted to, I'd do it.
Right. One of the things that I find when we look at, I call it the witching hours. So when we say, okay, well, this is all great that I quote should stop eating less at night, or I should stop car eating on the way home. But I look at those as the witching hours. It's when our brain starts to quiet, or the world around us starts to quiet, but our brain might still be on overdrive. Yeah. So what can we do instead? And it's finding replacement behaviors for it. And so if you're coming in, and a lot of times I'll kind of dig, and someone will say, well, no, I don't really have an afternoon snack or a nighttime snack. Well, what about when you get home? No. What about when you're opening the mail? Oh yeah. That's when they get whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if instead you immediately change clothes, get your walking shoes on and get outside, it doesn't even have to be about calorie burning or a lot of time or intensity, but it's about that mental shift of clearing that noise in your mind, clearing that clutter. And not only is it doing that, it's getting you out of the kitchen during those witching hours.
True. I like walking with friends. I have a couple of friends that I like to walk with. We just talk.
We call it walk and talk.
Exactly,
Right.
walk and talk. And but I hear you. It's when I should not be idle. I need to be doing something. I'm a little ADD. No, I'm a lot ADD.
And I think it's really important to know that about ourselves. And some people kind of, when we go back to, well, what does stress even mean? And the everyone has different varying levels of stress. Your normal life is what you thrive on, and you love having all of these different components of it. And if for someone else to have even a sliver of that, or to have to go on stage in front of people and perform, they would curl up into a ball, and that would be extreme stress.
Yes, but like I could not do what you do. Everyone has their talent and what they do. But if we can really have some self-realization, if we can really realize what it is we like, what we like to do, what will stop this detrimental behavior, and not what other people say, not how other people perceive us. It's what we feel about ourselves.
I think that is such a huge key to releasing stress.
I mean, a lot of times, a lot of people are worried what everyone's going to think. And like I said, unless you're out doing something to harm people, you're fine.
Have you always been like that, or did that change?
No. I was in high school and in college, and I conformed to every little, old New Orleans stereotype that I was supposed to be. And then I realized I wanted to be an actor, and I went to New York, and I was introduced to a complete different world. When I was little, before puberty, before you started worrying what everyone thought of you, I was just the freest, most creative kid. And then I think, I guess it's just typical, adolescence. You get really worried about friends thinking everything, and I think kids might have it. Some of them might have a better grip on it now. That you can be who you are. It doesn't matter. But later on, when I realized, this is I'm having a good time. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. It was quite freeing, to let go of worrying what other people thought.
And which also becomes our own self-judgment on that.
Exactly.
Too. And so, for you, kind of the things that you've done specifically to serve as releases for stress or anxiety and kind of these management type things that you've incorporated into your life, what kind of were some of the catalysts that you said, okay, I got to do something about this?
I like variety. I don't like doing the same thing all the time. Although, I've done some long runs on Broadway where you do the same show, 8 shows a week for a couple of years. But that's your job. But in life, I love getting together with friends. There's nothing I like better than like a dinner party for 6 at home, with some great friends. I love going to theater. I love going to see movies. I love going to other people's homes and hanging out.
But what was the catalyst that you said, okay, I need to start layering in these balance and wellness behaviors into my life?
Well, my family's business, my grandfather started an amusement park in 1928. So I always use the image and the analogy of a metaphor of a roller coaster, because life is a roller coaster. It's going to be up and down and fast and slow and scary, but thrilling. And it's sometimes most fun when you throw your hands up and just go with it. Knowing when to throw your hands up and just go with the ride is kind of the smart thing. There's some things we can control. There's very little that we can control. The only thing that we can control is ourselves and what we do and how we react to things and how we respond to things. That's all we can control. So when all these other factors come in to our lives that are going to give us stress, it's mainly our coping mechanisms that is the only little thing that we have. So when I realized that, and I kind of really realized that my mom kept on preaching that. She didn't necessarily live it for a long time, but I think, she learned that if she would read self-help books and all that stuff. I mean, back in the day, it was I'm okay, you're okay, and Jonathan Livingston Seagull and all that stuff. And she would say these little words like, you can't love anybody until you love yourself. I'm like, what in the hell is that supposed to mean? But it's so true. And finally, when I realized some of these little things I thought were so trite and so groovy, kumbaya, whatever, they really do make sense. It's the just like getting on an airplane when they tell you to if something goes wrong, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help someone else. You can't help anyone in this life unless you're really centered and you're taking care of yourself.
And I think you nailed it too, that the only thing that we really can control is our reactions. And so I think, the stressors are going to be there. And so when we say, I stress eat, I emotionally eat, any of these things, those things aren't going to change. They're almost always going to be there, but we can change our reactions to it and we can buffer it. So I think that's a huge takeaway for our listeners.
And we can participate or we can not. We can stop ourselves. You can have the cookie in your hand, take one bite, go, you know what? I've done this so many times. I've had something in my mouth like, you don't need that, and go to the garbage can and spit it out. That started like this last year. Because I used to be like a late night eater. I would come home from dinner and go to the fridge and open it up. And
I do too. My husband says, are you getting snacky? Yeah.
What is that about? My mom used to do that.
My dad too.
Really?
Yes.
And I think it's also learned behavior. And also, as you get older, I don't necessarily eat anything, but
no. And I'm curious of what's in there. And then also in my own fridge, I'll sometimes repeatedly, nothing's changed. Yes. I know I didn't put anything new in there.
Still
but
there.
Keep looking. So I think that's a big takeaway is like, okay, when we think about why do we stress eat? Well, first of all, why do we feel stressed? And a lot of that is our own perceptions of it. And that is one thing that we can really change. The next thing when we think about why we stress eat is that distraction. We're trying to turn down the noise or kind of numb out from whatever kind of negative thing may have happened. And then I think the big third takeaway for people is remembering that those carbs really activate these highly sensitive receptors in our brains that have a reaction in our bodies like a very strong drug like cocaine or heroin. Yeah. And so when we look at all of these factors, it can seem like, is it ever possible to not stress eat? But when you're at that moment of staring in your own fridge or your friend's fridge, is realizing that this is what's going on. It might be the distraction. It's any of these other things that we're looking for. And that can kind of help us understand those behaviors and say, okay, I need to either go to bed because I'm tired, right, or shift my mindset because I've got a bunch of stuff swirling in here.
I leave myself notes around the house. Literally, like if I'm find myself stress eating, I'll leave a note on the fridge like, do you need this?
I like that.
Or you're better than
I like that though, but I like, and it's in positive notes,
Positive notes, yeah.
And I think that that's fantastic. So I think understanding the why, and then, okay, so what are some of the other things that we can do? We talked about how do we insulate and how do we kind of buffer up that resilience and that resistance and that willpower and not let it get eroded and chiseled away through the day. So a huge one that you said is doing our very best to not worry what people think.
Right. And support yourself. If you don't have a great support system, or you're not getting what you need from your family or your spouse or your workers, or, we take a lot for granted. We expect people to read our minds and give us what we need without telling them. everything's about communication. No one's a mind reader, So, tell them, I'm going to try to stop binge eating or stress eating. So in a nice way, would you just say, are you really hungry, or are you binge eating? Or just say a nice supportive thing to me when I come in the room, like, oh, you're looking good, or tell people what you want from them.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion.
And if you don't get it, then give it to yourself.
And coaching them in how to do it. So they're not giving you the stink eye or saying the kind of cutting, do you really need that? But instead say, wow, you look fantastic.
Yes.
And that's code for, do you really need that?
Yes. Or, you look great. Would you like some celery?
Right. I like that. But I think that's a big thing of, number one, sharing our goals with the people around us. So we're verbalizing them and making them a reality. Yeah. But not just sharing the goal, but also asking for help in that.
It's all right to ask for help. We all thought this whole mentality of I can do it all on my own. No one does anything all on their own. Maybe if you're a hermit, you can do some things on your own, but we interact with people on a daily basis. They influence our lives whether we know it or not. So the people that are closest to you, make sure you tell them what you need from them, and if they're toxic, get them out.
I think that's a huge thing too, is surrounding ourselves with positive people. And not just positive people, but everything that we're putting around us that's any type of stimulus around us, what is that? And so when it comes to people, one of the examples that I give all the time is, okay, if it's your mom or your sister, you can't really change that. Right. You got to spend time with them, and that's just what it is. But we have a lot of friends who we say the quote should, oh, I should get together with them more often, or I need to get together with them. But the reality is that they drain us, and they leave us feeling a lot worse about ourselves after that time spent with them. Then a lot of times you think about other friends who you might feel really tired, drained, exhausted. You get together with them and wow, they just pick you right up.
There's nothing like positivity and being around someone that boosts you and makes you feel great.
But I find that we don't do it enough. I think we have the obligation that person's been a friend of mine forever. They've been a good friend to me. I should get together with them. My solution for those is to dilute it.
I firmly, I hear you, because I do it naturally I just distance myself.
Yes.
And I don't know why, but I'm like, I haven't caught, well, there's a good reason. But
and some, we don't want to necessarily say, lose those friends who aren't so supportive, because some of those people, they need our love more than anybody, but maybe they don't need our undivided attention as much, or we can dilute them with multiple people, kind of have it in a group. And then also just making sure that we're protecting that energy of our own by reaching out to those people who lift us up, so we're not always the ones doing the lifting.
It's a two-way street.
Yes.
Everything is a two-way street. It's a give-take relationship. And, also might be good, like if, someone else that's going through the same thing, that they want to eat healthy, and to do it together, and not in a codependent way, but, support
positive.
each other in a positive way, not like you're...
And sharing ideas, sharing recipes, or, hey, I made this, do you want to try some? Right. So making it fun and
so you're not doing it alone.
And then I think the other thing, when we look at how do we surround ourselves, it's the people we surround ourselves with, but it's also the other influences. You get in the car, if you have the radio on, and it's this talk radio, but it's often like scream and sometimes silence is the best. Music.
I love music.
Yes. And I think when we go back to what are the things we can control, our reactions, and something like controlling, now if you're in someone else's space, we can't always control what's around us, but when we are in our own space, in our home, our car, our office, we often can see what is that extra, what's around us as far as the influence of noise or music or good conversation or silence.
Like the television. I grew up with TVs. I mean, when we were little, we would, have TV after dinner. Then TV became part of dinner. My parents had TV in their bedroom. Then we had little TVs in our bedrooms. And when I moved to New York and got together with my partner, he was like, no TV in the bedroom. That's not where it goes. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, no, the TV is something you watch when you want to watch it. But the bedroom is where you sleep, you read, and whatever else. But, that's how the bedroom's for two things.
Right.
And TV's not one of them.
Right.
It just, it can deplete you of your energy and suck you in. Some people like it for a background noise, but I would prefer music with white noise box or something.
And
like
looking
that.
at what's that bringing into our energy and into our space. So part of it, in addition to what we surround ourselves with and kind of the influences and the messages that we're giving ourselves, is just simply feeling like we're overstretched and there's just not enough time to do everything we want to do. And one of the things that I'll encourage people to do is moderate our workload. And that doesn't even mean just telling your boss no, because we can't do that all the time. Like, you want me to take on a new project? No,
I'm a little busy.
We don't really have the option for that. But so it doesn't always apply to just work, but what are things that we have in our own life that are on our to-do list that if we put those off, we have so much more time.
Oh, and also, I'm a pleaser, so I'm always trying to like do favors for people because, I'd like them to do them for me. And to be honest, you have to be honest. Can I do this or can I not? And you just, if they're a good friend, they'll understand. And if they don't understand, well, then, then you have problems. But we have to have more control over our workload.
And you said you're a big list person.
I'm a big list. I make lists in my sleep. I stole that line from Rent. But, I do. I make the lists and I check them off. And if I don't get something done, it'll get done tomorrow. The world is going to turn. And
starting with that list and then having it, you said kind of like your two sides of the list.
Exactly.
What's absolutely necessary and then what's negotiable.
And how much time to spend on that. I'm writing too. I've written 3 books and now I'm writing a play. And it's not easy. And I find getting into it, once I'm in it, I'm fine. But it's the initial getting into it. And I find, if you're into something and it's working, stick with it. Let something else go by the wayside. If something's working, don't mess with it.
I think that's a great point because there's so much perfection that we put on ourselves that the floor isn't just right, or the floor isn't mopped, or I didn't clean this, or whatever it is about how we're with our home or our outfits or whatever it is. But if we just let some of that paralysis of perfection subside a bit.
And entertaining, or we have people over. My mother was a wonderful, wonderful lady, but her big problem was if she'd have a party, the stress that she put on herself to make everything right and perfect was detrimental to her enjoying the party. At the end, she would not have that great of a time. And I thought, honey, why are you doing this to yourself? What's the point? It was always around the holidays, and I said, it's mainly family. And if they're going to judge you, boy,
we got bigger problems.
We got bigger problems than that. And I found myself getting the same way when we'd have big Christmas parties and stuff. And I finally realized I don't want to be like this. It doesn't matter. And de-stressing for those kind of things, it was very important. And I think I've kind of done it pretty much.
And I think going back to, okay, we can't always tell our boss no, but we have a lot of things we're putting on our own plate, our own list that are negotiable. So I think that's a big key of having that free time and having our brain to stop the noise and to stop that spiral in our brain that we're turning to food or drink to kind of numb it out. So the other big thing is sleep. And so much of us, because there's so much that we feel like we need to do, we slack on our sleep. But what's absolutely insane, especially if you're looking at cravings, that when we have that lack of sleep, directly correlated with the increase in cravings, and usually those carb foods that we're looking for energy. So if we don't get enough sleep, we're craving more carbs, usually more sugar for that pick-me-up.
I never had problems sleeping, never, for the longest time. And then I hit a certain age and I was like, wait, what is, I used to laugh at my parents and my grandparents like, oh, I didn't sleep well last night. We're like, what is wrong with you people? My head hits the pillow and I go out. And I started taking some things to help me sleep. And I realized I was relying on that for sleep. And finally I stopped. And every once in a while, I'll take a melatonin or something, prescribed, rarely now. And I find that although it is induced sleep, it is not the best, at least for me. I feel much more groggy in the morning.
Did you shift your pre-bed habits to kind of make falling asleep and staying asleep easier?
Of course not.
Okay. Because that's a big thing. So you mentioned taking the melatonin. When we look at our screens at night, whether it's our TV, our phones, the computer, that actually interferes with our body's production of melatonin, which makes it harder for us to sleep. And I think there's all these steps. Arianna Huffington has a book called Sleep Revolution, and I love it.
I've got to get that.
Oh, she has basically her whole formula. Her one of her strongest recommendations is to put your phone in the other room while you sleep.
Oh.
Because how many times do you wake up at night to check the time on our phones, and then you get caught up with, was there an email or a text or something else?
I have a friend that turns it completely off.
Yes. And then, but even if you thought, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Even if you just put it in the next room right there, and then get alarm clock.
A good
that's just
old-fashioned
an alarm
clock.
But that can be key. And so thinking, what are the things that are, you get in bed for a normal night's sleep, but then are you spending an hour scrolling through social media?
Right.
But if you've got that phone in the other room, it kind of halts that as well.
It's also, I think, with these phones and everything and computers, it's this fear of being alone or disconnected. And, when it boils down to it, we have to find some time to be alone. And there's nothing wrong
and
with
disconnected.
And disconnected. I thought, I used to hate eating alone. I thought it was, how sad. I like it now. I do, because also I like eating with other people because you talk a lot while you eat, and it
slows you down.
It slows me down. I'm a fast eater, and I find myself talking. And sometimes, if I'm, we're all talking a lot, I'll get full, and I will not have finished my entire dinner.
If you're by yourself, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm a clean plate boy. I mean, I was like, we weren't told we have to eat everything, but for some reason I did. I hate wasting anything. I really hate it. So these restaurants that have huge, huge portions, I'm like, no, just give me enough.
But I like the idea of tuning into enjoying that time if it's by yourself for that meal, but also enjoying the company if it's there. But I think on the note of sleep, and we were talking about minimizing the screen time and the distractions and stuff like that, limiting caffeine.
Oh, yeah.
After lunch is going to be key for sleep.
Really, after lunch is good because
it's after lunch as we're doing this podcast right now, and I've got my iced coffee
That's
right
true.
here.
No, it's not. Well, I found I can't do it really after 4 or 5 o'clock.
That's really what I look at. They in the air quotes, but most kind of caffeine recommendations are try not to have it after lunch because it can, the half-life of caffeine, it does stay in our system for 6+ hours.
Right.
But depending on when you go to bed, I'll usually have one iced coffee in the afternoon and then dial it back after that. But the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is alcohol. It makes it easier for us to fall asleep, but it actually really interferes with our body's ability to get into that deep
sleep,
restorative
sleep.
sleep.
The sugar, also there's so much sugar, it keeps you speedy.
Well, even if it's a no sugar alcohol, simply just the alcohol itself interferes with the patterns of our sleep and that deep sleep that's really the replenishing, restorative sleep. So we think, oh, I'll have a drink because it makes me fall asleep, but it's really that quality is not so good. So there's so much different things that we can do. So some of the things we didn't cover that we talk about stress eating are things that in future podcasts we'll be talking about. So steering clear of white carbs, added sugars, eating frequently through the day. How often do we need to eat? How much protein do we need to eat? What types of fats? How much do we need to drink to stay well hydrated?
A lot.
But these are all things that if you're listening to this and you go, well, tell me this. These are all topics that we'll be covering. I'll be covering in future podcasts where we're going to dive into each individual topic, but there's so much about food and why we eat that we can know all those numbers, we can know all those recommendations, but these things that Bryan and I just talked about of why do we do the things we do, why do we stress eat, what can we do to change these behaviors, that's really at the core of it. And if we can address these issues and make these just slight shifts to our patterns and our habits, it makes all those other things really easy when we're ready to implement those changes.
And forgive yourself. You might start and stop and don't beat yourself up. Then just get back on the horse and start over tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day, or the rest of the afternoon. Don't beat yourself up. The world's going to do that for you.
I agree. And looking at what would you tell your friend? How would you support your friend if they shared that? So
yes, look in the mirror and be your own friend.
So Bryan, I'm so grateful for you to join for this podcast. It's been, I think it's been enlightening for me to hear this journey that you've taken, because while you look at it as kind of, you've taken it lightly, you share it lightly of how you have made these changes and the way that you have really released a lot of the pressures you've put on yourself. You've released the judgment and you've released worrying what anyone else thinks. And you've kind of chosen to live your life led with happiness forward. But that's a really big deal to have first of all, the desire to do that, and then really have the follow through to make these changes. They're not always easy things. So
I had some good teachers.
I admire it. I admire it a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. You can follow Molly Kimball RD on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life possible.